Tetris is one of the most recognizable games today, having sold over 100 million copies, making it the third best-selling game ever. Tetris has always seemed to bring intrigue to the players ever since its conception in the late days of the Soviet Union. The game started with the young Alexei Pajitnov, who found himself developing on a side project while working for the computing department of the Russian Academy of Sciences. He came up with the idea for Tetris through a board game called Pentaminos that he played as a child. The game consisted of shapes made up of 5 one-by-one blocks, and the goal was to arrange them in such a way that they would create a sort of pixel art. The game inspired a young Alexei, as he had always imagined the shapes falling from the sky into perfect square patterns and snapping into place. The early versions of the game were spread by hand on floppy disks, and were passed around the computing department. Now, if you didn't know how Tetris works, you'd have to be living under a rock, but just in case, we'll go over the basics. In Tetris, the player is presented with a screen that is 10 wide and 20 tall. At the very top of the screen, a random tetramino falls, and it is the player's job to drop it in such a way that it fits with the other tetraminos into one straight line across the bottom of the screen. When a full line is made, it will be cleared, and the paces above will shift down to fill the gap made by the line. There are 4 different types of line clears in the NES version of the game, the one that we will be focusing on. The single, the double, the triple, and the Tetris. While the single, double, and triple score a bit more than each other, going up exponentially, the Tetris scores a ton more than the other, making it extremely valuable. So, the goal of the game now has been made into who can score the most Tetris to get the most points. The way that players can lose at Tetris is by topping out, wherein your stack reaches the top of the board without being able to clear the lines on the screen, leaving gaps in each line. The game of Tetris, although having been around since the late 80s, has only seen prominence in its competitive scene recently. The first widespread Tetris championship was the NWC, or the Nintendo World Championship. The championship was held as a kind of homage to Nintendo's dominance in gaming at the time. It was hosted across 29 cities in the US, and after all 29 mini tournaments were finished, the winners of each would be awarded the title of City Champ and moved on to the World Finals. In the World Finals, 3 games were played: Super Mario, Rad Racer, and Tetris. While not winning the tournament, a young Robin Mihara had won his city's local tournament, and in doing so, the idea for a Tetris-focused World Championship was planted in his head. But, after coming to a loss at the Nintendo World Championship, that was buried for years. In 2009, almost 2 decades after the NWC, a player called Harry Hong recorded the first ever documented max out, the maximum possible score on Tetris, a score of 999,999. After he maxed the game out, Harry uploaded a video of his max out to YouTube, which caught the eye of a filmmaker called Adam Cornelius. Soon, with Adam's help, a small Kickstarter was created, along with a 4-minute trailer for a film about Harry's max out. Although having not seemed to produce the full-length documentary, the Kickstarter fund managed to do something else worthwhile for the Tetris community. The campaign brought smaller Tetris players out of the shadows, and sooner rather than later, players began posting scores of their own. One of the most noteworthy being Jonas Neubauer, who posted a max out of his own. And soon, with the small community of Tetris growing, a question arose. Who was the best Tetris player of all time? In due time, Robin Mihara sought to answer the question with a tournament, saying at times, "We always wondered why the biggest game in the world, that's probably the most played game ever, didn't have a champion. With Adam Cornelius as director, Rob and Mihara as hosts, along with a new guy, a producer named Vince Clemente. They set out to document their interviews of top-level Tetris players and their subsequent invitations to a championship in Los Angeles for a chance to become the Tetris World Champion. The documentary, called Ecstasy of Order, ended up being a massive success, along with the first ever CTWC. The championship brought hundreds together, when most of whom had never really met before. Well, ultimately, Jonas came out on top. The first ever CTWC succeeded in a way of connecting a group that ultimately was few and far between, and bringing them together to celebrate the game that they all loved. The original championship was held in a Los Angeles movie theater, and after the success, the organizing team realized they were going to need a much bigger venue. While there were few options, the Portland, Oregon Retro Gaming Expo seemed like a perfect place to host. And in every competition, right up until the 2020s, the CTWC has been hosted there. Although the community has seen growth from the initial player pool at the first tournament, it was not at all exponential, being that from 2010 to 2017, Jonas had won all but one tournaments, only faulting one loss to Harry Hong. But something changed in 2017. The change being a YouTube video called Boom Tetris for Jeff. Over the course of the previous couple of tournaments, the commentators had become so used to seeing the same thing happen in the same games that their catchphrases were beginning to become memed. The video Boom Tetris for Jeff is a perfect showcase of this memeing of the commentators' catchphrases, as it is a compilation of every time they say Boom Tetris for Jeff, which is a ton. The video's comedy led to it gaining a lot of notoriety, having been seen by 720,000 people to date, and it is quoted by many newcomers to Tetris, especially in the 2018 tournament, as the reason that they came to the tournament. The talent pool in 2018 looked to be expanding greatly, as YouTube was aggressively recommending videos to people about Tetris. The CTWC being called the Classic Tetris World Championship is a bit of a stretch. In the years leading up to 2018, a Game Scout put it best in a video link below by saying that the Tetris World Championships are kind of like the World Series of baseball. Technically it's a world competition, but everyone's from the United States except for a sole representative from Canada. The championship's newfound publicity meant that more and more skilled players from around the world were going to come to compete. Korian, a player from Japan who had mastered the Tetris the Grandmaster series, a different version than what was played in the CTWC, but with still the same basic concepts. Korian found himself in position to win with fan favor alone. Korian had competed back in 2016 and 17, yet found himself at a loss both years. But, through setting a new world record of the game, and by removing the score cap, he found himself the fan favorite, even being forecasted to win in 2018 by Jonas himself. Another competitor, who was a classic Tetris European champion, called Yanni, was also ready to enter the American-held championships in 2018, having lost the previous years to a difference in frame rates from American to European televisions. Needless to say, the 2018 CTWC was stacked with competition, and an intense competition at that. The community had truly grown, connecting people all around the world in one big tournament. For most of the competition, the venue was close to home, providing little trouble with transport. But for Yanni, who lived in Finland, the transport situation was a bit more of a struggle, as a transatlantic flight was required to reach his destination. Yanni, unfortunately, missed his flight by a couple of minutes, and it was looking like he might have to miss the tournament entirely. But a fan, known as Vorta, wanted so badly to see his favorite competitor compete that last second he pitched in the required amount for a last-second flight to Oregon. The flight cost a ton, over $1,700, and it was a big blow to Vorta's wallet, but he said it was worth it, to see his favorite player play. The community surrounding the game is a very welcoming one, and seems to be very caring and supporting. In another instance of their overwhelming support for each other, one of the community's commentators stepped out of the booth to help a player in the Tetris speedrun category, as the player's controller had been broken. In a Tetris speedrun, the goal is to just get to level 19 as fast as possible, or to clear 190 lines as fast as possible. To do this, the down button on the Tetris controller is absolutely necessary, but for player Green Tea, his down button was broken. But in the last second, one of the commentators stepped out of the booth and asked for his controller to be swapped out, saving him, although Green Tea still did not come out with the victory. Community is a basic human tendency. To find a group of like-minded individuals is something that anyone can attest to being an amazing feeling. Many things have brought people together over the course of history, whether it is a religion or the brainchild of a Soviet programmer. Bonds can be formed over the most niche of niches. The CTWC was a group of people who sought to see these bonds for themselves, and when they met each other for the first time in LA, or when they still meet, to some of their biggest crowds ever in Portland, you still see a mutual joy among competitors and fans alike. In the following year's tournament, something greater happened to truly show how the community had grown as a whole. In 2019, at the end of the CTWC, the fans got to see a beautiful moment of Alexei, the creator of Tetris, giving the now two-time champ, Joseph Saley, his first place T-Block trophy. In the past couple of years, people have struggled to find the same camaraderie and friendship that the community brought to us in person. But for a community based around a game like Tetris, it found a way. The championships for both 2020 and 2021 were held online and broadcast to millions, bringing in members of the community who otherwise may not have had a way to participate in the championship. Like the story of Uncle Mike, the CTWC's oldest player who was only able to participate through the online entry system of the tournament. One can only imagine if, while working on the original Tetris in the 1980s, Alexei had any idea of the sheer impact that Tetris would create, and of the large community that it would birth.